Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's midday weather outlook for the southern region brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, it's been a very interesting week for us in terms of forecasting because we've had such major model discrepancies on this weather system that will be showing up at the end of the week. So I just want to start off here getting right into the meat of this. We're looking at last night's 0Z run, so this is the latest model runs we have available early this morning on Tuesday morning. And on the left you have the GFS operational run that's taking out through the next week in terms of total accumulated precipitation, and on the right we have the European, and you can see some major differences across the southern region, specifically with the precipitation that could be happening right here in the lower Mississippi River Valley. That's the GFS I just circled. Look at the European, and if you're over here in the Carolinas through Georgia, the European is much drier than the GFS. So European again showing much less precipitation than the GFS model. And we have to talk about what's going on here and why there are such major differences. And please don't forget, look at Texas. The differences there are substantial as well. So if you just take a look, this problem extends into week 2 as well. So I have the GFS ensemble on the left, I have the European ensemble on the right. And where there is some agreement in the southern region is to keep the Carolinas and parts of Virginia on the wetter side of things. But you can see that the GFS ensemble wants to keep it relatively dry through this quarter, whereas the European is wet in there. So we need to discuss what these model differences are and why they're significant, and then figure out which of these two models is the one that's actually given us the best understanding of what's going on. So first things first, we've had this over the last 24 hours to about 5 o'clock this morning Central Time, and the big system that wrapped up in the middle part of the country did add quite a bit more rainfall into this corridor of our southern region. And putting it together with the previous 7 days, it has been a very, very wet time period. We have, of course, broken down that pattern we had seen that had kept that big protective ridge over the southeast. And of course, Tropical Storm Nestor came through here, dumping quite a bit of rainfall. So there have been some pockets of extremely heavy rainfall in the last 7 days, some locations seeing between 6 and 10 inches of rainfall. Now look at what that's done to our soil moisture anomalies. This was a week ago, so back on the 15th, you can kind of get focused in on your region, and I'm going to show you how much things have changed between last week and this week. So here's the latest output. So I'm expecting some changes in our drought monitor, which will be updated later today and released to the public on Thursday. But you can see, especially over the southeast where Nestor had come through here, watch again, this was again a week ago where we were seeing up to 4 to almost 5 inch deficits. Now we see a whole lot more in the 2 to 3 inch range across that region. So the recent rainfall has done a lot to help with the drought situation, although it has hampered harvest efforts for peanuts and cotton, especially in this area. What are we watching in the day today? The system that curled through the middle part of the country yesterday still has a lingering boundary that will be going through parts of the Carolinas, getting to Georgia, that could be bringing in some strong to severe storms today. Let's go ahead and take a look at that system first. So as we play this forward, there we are. By the time we get into mid-morning, this is now around noon, right in through here, we're watching for some widely scattered showers and storms to be moving through parts of Virginia, North and South Carolina, back into Georgia. It's going to be widely hit or miss, and you can see the main front finally pushes through by about 9 o'clock tonight. Now behind it, look at what happens. This dominant area of higher pressure comes in on the back side of this. This is not a southeast ridge like we saw during the summer. Much different pattern that made this high pressure, and it's going to tend to keep things relatively benign across the southeast for a while. But it's what's brewing right back here in the south central part of the United States. Once I get you out into about, this is 7 a.m. Thursday morning Central Time, getting you through mid-morning on Thursday. That's where we start to see widespread precipitation in this area. And that is also where our model discrepancy begins. It's at the end of this week where things change, and we've got to talk about why that is. So take a look at this. We're going to look at surface pressure first, do a model comparison. GFS will always be on the left. The European will always be over here on the right. We're going to start this off Friday at 7 p.m. Now the significant difference has to do with the orientation of higher atmospheric pressure in through here, whereas the European model has it sitting more concentrated over like parts of Illinois, Indiana, that region. So we're already seeing a difference in the models. Now watch what happens as I get into a day later. This is now Saturday evening. You can see both models are attempting to put a low pressure system somewhere up here on the border of Manitoba and Quebec, Ontario. And they are dragging a frontal feature into this area. But it's what's going on with high pressure, again, that's critical to look at. So you can see the higher pressure pressure zone in through here in the GFS, but the European model puts it over here. And one of the reasons why it's doing that is it's actually got at the surface a little cutoff low, in the upper levels, a cutoff low coming through this area, and this will help to funnel moisture back into this region, whereas the GFS is going to be a bit more moisture starved at this point. Let's now get into Sunday. Now we can see some major differences in the models. Yeah, they both put the same low over the Hudson Bay, but you can see high pressure sitting here for the GFS. For the European, it's a much broader region. So again, we're pumping quite a bit more moisture. And look at how much lower the pressure is in that corridor here versus the GFS, which wants to put a ridge right here over parts of Colorado, Nebraska, and Kansas. Now we ask ourselves, why is the GFS doing what it's doing, and why is the European doing what it is doing? And the story is best told, I think, by looking up in the atmosphere. And here's the key difference. You see, the GFS is sweeping this trough through on Friday, which means it's going to progress farther to the east and bring more rain over to this corridor. The European has a cutoff low sitting here. You can see the wave breaking over the top of it with higher atmospheric pressure, keeping this area, I'll put a D in it, drier. All right, that's Friday. Look at the differences on Saturday. They both have this feature, but the European has this secondary little cutoff low that is sweeping through parts of the south central United States, and it is nowhere to be found in the GFS. And that difference, you can see, is what makes the GFS model drier here and the European much wetter here. It's what makes the GFS wetter where I just drew the line, whereas the European is drier. You see, higher atmospheric pressure is going to keep dominating in this area, funneling the moisture around. The GFS has none of it. It wants to push it all through. So this is only looking at the precipitation for the 3 days leading up to Monday. So this is basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That's what we're looking at here. So it's the end of the week, major model differences in the path of this precipitation. And it's startlingly different between these two models. So we have other resources to go to get an idea on which model's got a handle on this and which one doesn't. So the Canadians run a model, their model called the GEM. This is what it shows over the next, this is precipitation during that time period. So after the first system goes through, and look at what it does. It tends to follow the European by keeping this dry with higher pressure, pumping moisture into this little cutoff low that sweeps through here. So it is much more in line with the European model. So the Canadians and the Europeans do agree. The Germans also run a model. It's called ICON, and this is what it says. And what do you notice? A very similar picture painted here through the next. Now this only gets us out to Saturday night. This model only runs out 120 hours. But through that time period, it is also producing the cutoff low that sweeps in through here that the European was, that the GFS did not. So that makes it drier here and wetter in that central corridor here. So given that analysis and given the current state of things, when we try to go in and see how well the models are initialized, I'm leaning toward the blend of the ICON, the GEM, and the European model. And I'm hoping to see that within the next 24 hours, the GFS comes in with a similar scenario. We're going to have to wait and watch and see how this one unfolds at the end of the week. This is a very tricky forecast, but it seems as though the European and its friends here seem to have a handle on this one. Okay. Now look at what it does to our temperature patterns. This is quite interesting. We're now going to go back to our comparison between the European ensemble, which I have on the left, and the GFS ensemble on the right. I apologize. It looks like I flipped my models here. I used to have the GFS on the left and the European on the right, but still you see the same thing. I have a more blown out view here of the GFS and a more focused view of the European. We can actually see halfway decent agreement across our southern region over the next 5 days in temperatures, with both of them bringing in cooler air in through this corridor, although the GFS advances it a little bit farther toward the south and east simply because of the trough that sweeps through rather than cutting off a low in this area. So maybe the GFS is too cold over the southeast. That would be my assessment here. Looking in the 6 to 10 day time period, that's where we end up trying to develop a much broader trough that sits over the central, kind of sits something like this, giving us a little bit of ridging over the southeast. You can see that the European model is a bit more expansive with the warm weather, than the GFS is. But overall, a similar pattern in terms of our temperature anomalies when you look across the southern region. And this is out to the 11 to 15 day time period. And also, this looks relatively similar. You can see that it's basically Florida and the West Coast that are seeing the warmer than average temperatures at this point. So hopefully this multi-model analysis has offered some sort of a clue as to what to expect over the coming days. Go back and rewatch that middle section if you want, that talks about the differences in rainfall beginning at the end of this week, really starting Friday through Monday. And those differences are substantial for our southern region. We'll keep you updated, give you a brand new update tomorrow. I'll include this in my long-range forecast, and of course we'll talk about it again on Thursday before this whole event gets going. But let's just keep an eye on it together today, okay? So with that, I think I'll wrap up this southern region forecast video. Thank you for giving me your attention this morning. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.